Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. Yesterday we talked about how our tongue can become a dangerous weapon. It can be like a gun that is deadly, that can kill relationships, our influence, kill another person's spirit. The tongue can be a very dangerous thing, and we should be very careful in how we use our tongue. Well, today in Psalm 45, we read how our tongue can become a ready pen. Not a dangerous gun or a dangerous sword, but a ready pen. And this is found in Psalm 45 at the beginning, where it says, "My heart overflows with a good theme. I address my verses to the king. My tongue is the pen of a ready writer." The way that the psalmist's tongue had become a useful pen, a ready pen, was by having his mind, his heart saturated with this good theme and literally bubbling over with this good theme. And as you go and read the psalm, you find out what this good theme actually was. And it goes on to talk about this glorious king with this wonderful government and the call to this bride to come and forsake her family and to come and join herself to this king in marriage and forsake all and devote all to him, and the glory that would result from that marriage towards that bride. And it's just a beautiful picture of this marriage between this king and this bride. And the psalmist had this thing bubbling over within him, and it caused his tongue to become like a ready pen. He was ready to declare, to record, to make known this good theme that was within him. Now, as we read this psalm, there's been different speculation as to what this psalm is specifically talking about. Some would see this psalm as talking about a specific king. And even with that viewpoint, there's some disagreement as to what exact or which exact king this is referring to. Is it Ahab and Jezebel? Is it talking about Solomon with his Egyptian bride? What specific king would it be talking about? And I think that I would agree with the commentators who say that it most likely isn't talking about any specific king at all. That the theme of this psalm, the content of this psalm, is too lofty and too transcendent to be really speaking about any specific earthly king at all. And it's very likely that the psalmist here has a prophetic vision of the messianic reign of Christ. And that is what he is writing down. This is the good theme that was bubbling over in him, this prophetic vision of the messianic reign of Christ. And when we think about it in terms of that, it opens up this psalm to have profound meaning. As a matter of fact, Hebrews, in Hebrews chapter 1, I believe it's verse 9, actually quotes from this psalm and attributes it to Christ. So all the more reason to think that this psalm is at least secondarily, if not primarily, talking about the Messiah, Jesus Christ himself. And so what we walk away with is that the way that we can have our tongues as a ready pen is to have our heart bubbling over with this good theme about Jesus Christ, the glorious King. There's some specific things, though, that we can focus on about Christ that are brought out in this psalm. One is the person of Christ. How good and how pleasant the person of Christ is. This is found in verse 2. It says, "You are fairer than the sons of men." And that is definitely true. Jesus Christ is fairer than the sons of men. He was the Son of Man, but he was also the Son of God. And therefore, he had a particular grace about him that made him fairer and more pleasant, more delightful than any other human being that has ever lived. And so we can focus on how fair Christ is and have our hearts bubble over with a good theme. We can focus on the words of Christ. It says, "Grace is poured upon your lips," also in verse 2. And certainly Jesus spoke the words of grace, and he spoke words of truth. And those words have an attractiveness to it. Even the people who listened to Jesus originally speak, they say, no one has ever spoken like this before, and they were mesmerized by this great teacher. So the words of Christ, when we dwell on the words of Christ, it causes our hearts to bubble over with a good theme. The triumph of Christ, recorded here in verses 3-8, where it says, "Gird your sword on your thigh, O mighty one, in your splendor and your majesty, and in your majesty ride on victoriously. For the cause of truth and meekness and righteousness, let your right hand teach you awesome things. Your arrows are sharp, the peoples fall under you. Your arrows are in the heart of the king's enemies." And so here you have the victorious triumph of Christ pictured here in this psalm. And when we focus on and think about how victorious Christ is, how glorious and powerful and mighty Christ is, our hearts bubble over with a good theme. Also, the upright rule of Christ is captured here in verses 6 and 7. It says, "Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness." And that's a sign of a good king, when he's able to uphold righteousness but punish wickedness, and to be able to discern between those two things. And Christ has an upright rule in that he is able to administer justice in his rule. So when we think about the upright rule of Christ, our hearts bubble over with a pleasant theme. And then we see the delight of his royal presence. This is just a delightful part of the psalm. This is found in verses 7-9. It says, "You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of joy above your fellows. All your garments are fragrant with myrrh and aloes and cassia. Out of ivory palaces, stringed instruments have made you glad. King's daughters are among your noble ladies. At your right hand stands the queen in gold from Ophir." So here you have the delight of his royal presence. It talks about his garments. They're so saturated with myrrh, aloes, and cassia that it's almost like the garment itself is made of these substances. And he talks about these ivory palaces and this queen in gold that is at his right hand. It's a picture of his royal presence. And when we think about and reflect on Christ's royal presence, and when we desire his presence in our life, and we want to be around him because being around him is so pleasant and delightful, our hearts bubble over with a good theme. So we can meditate on Christ in his person, in the wonderful words he spoke, his victorious triumph, the uprightness of his rule, and the delight of his royal presence. And our hearts will bubble over with a good theme and make our tongues a ready pen, or a pen of a ready writer, I should say. And then we have the response of the bride to the king as well. And there's basically two things that she's called to do. One is to forsake all other relationships, or we could say forsake her old life for the king. In verse 10, it says, "Listen, O daughter, give attention and incline your ear. Forget your people and your father's house. Then the king will desire your beauty." So the daughter here, or the bride here, is told to forsake all and to cling to the king, which is a call that we have as the church. In Ephesians chapter 5, where an analogy is made there by the Apostle Paul about the church representing the wife, Christ representing the loving husband in the relationship. Time and time again throughout scriptures, Christ is seen as the husband, the church as the bride. And when we come to Christ, that's what we're called to do, to forsake our old life and give our lives over to him. Here the bride was told to offer him her devotion. It says in the latter part of verse 11, "Because he is your Lord, bow down to him." Here, he's not just going to be her husband, but he's also the king. And so she was to give him her respect and and give him honor and devotion. And so if she would give him and forsake all for him, and then give him her wholehearted devotion, a lot of good things would result for her. For one, she would receive devotion. from others. In verse 12, the daughter of Tyre will come with a gift. The rich among the people will seek your favor. As they see you connected to this glorious and wonderful king, and that you are married to him, people will respect that and honor you and give their own devotion to you as you devote to him, as you are devoted to him. Also, this bride would attain glory. In verse 13, the king's daughter is all glorious within. Her clothing is interwoven with gold. And that's definitely true with those who have connected themselves to Christ in a relationship with Christ. There's a particular glory in their lives that is interwoven within their lives, a gold, a divine part of their lives in which they are connected to God, living for God, abiding in Christ, and having God living through them and being expressed by them. And it causes a particular glory to come over their lives. And then in verses 14 through 15, it talks about attendants will attach themselves to you. She will be led to the king in embroidered work. The virgins, her companions who follow her, will be brought to you. They will be led forth with gladness and rejoicing. They will enter into the king's palace. And so the church, as they are connected to Christ, will also bring other people in to be connected to Christ as well. In verse 16, here you see that the bride will gain sons. In the place of your fathers will be your sons. You shall make them princes in all the earth. So not only will you enjoy this beautiful relationship with this glorious king, but also you are going to have offspring that will come forth from you that will be like princes. And that's true. As the church goes on generation after generation, more and more people are connected to Christ. More and more people are brought close to Christ through the message presented by the church, and they become princes, royal princes before God. And then this all results in remembrance and thanksgiving. In verse 17, in all likelihood, this is talking about Christ, not so much the bride. It says, I will cause your name to be remembered in all generations. Therefore, the peoples will give thanks or give you thanks forever and ever. That's definitely true. Christ has been remembered in all generations because he has the bride, the church, but not only the bride, the church of one generation, but that generation continues on more and more and more throughout the generations. And therefore, his name is remembered and people give thanks to him. Not only now, but will continue to give thanks forever and ever throughout eternity as they live with him throughout eternity. And so all these things come together as this beautiful, good theme that's bubbling up in the psalmist. And it causes him to have a tongue that is the pen of a ready writer, ready to write these good things. And when we meditate on these things and think on these things, we too become our tongue becomes a pen of a ready writer. Not a destroying weapon, but a pen of a ready writer. And so let's be focused on these themes today, especially as we read Psalm 45. And with that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.